I just want to thank Diane for inviting me out here. So just quickly, just to throw this out, I'm running in the 9th Congressional District against a guy named Adam Smith, who, yes, some may think that I chose that name or him as for that name alone, the godfather of the British East India Company, or the philosophical architect, if you will, of the 1700s, Adam Smith. But it's interesting because people will ask, say, well, you're running as a Democrat, but Adam Smith is a Democrat. And when you go through his record, number one, he's voted for every one of the wars, including, under Bush and Cheney, was supportive of Obama in the Libya invasion. He's voted for every one of the free trade acts, except for one, I think, was, I remember talking to some of the union crowd who were just drilling him on this one, and he backed off. I think it was the Central American Free Trade Agreement, but and also every one of the police state measures, Patriot Act 1, 2, and he was the co-sponsor of the National Defense Authorization Act, the only co-sponsor of the National Defense Authorization. So it's kind of funny because if that's what people say, oh, he's a Democrat, why are you a Democrat running against him, then maybe I'm not a Democrat either, if that's what they're thinking is a Democrat. But obviously the party thing doesn't mean anything, and I think what Diane's website, which is the quote from Franklin Roosevelt, speak not of parties but of universal principles, which is what Roosevelt laid out. Now, just one final note on Adam Smith. He did introduce a bill to repeal the detention policy of the National Defense Authorization Act. So hopefully this is a road to Damascus conversion and not a what they call CYA, cover your ass. Anyway, but I want to lay forward what is the world that could be were Barack Obama removed, and which is, just to say it over and over and over, he must go now. There's nothing good that can come in this nation until he's gone. This war danger, which these generals have brilliantly held back so far, but they're up at the end of the rope on what they can do as military men. It's not exactly a precedent to have a president authorize the military to do something and then say we're not going to do it. That's not a tradition. So they're at the point where they can't do anything more, and the only policy that can work, or the only thing that can work to stop this war fundamentally, is to get Obama out. And so we do have the House Concurrent Resolution 107 from Walter Jones. We need to mobilize our networks to get signers of this, but not just signers of this as simply putting Obama in check, but this as the path to get him out. But that being said, we have to remember that it's not Obama that's running the show here. This is the British Empire, what people today call the New World Order, one world government, globalization. It's an expression of what the British Empire actually was, which was the British East India Company, which was a conglomerate of banks, insurance, and multinational cartels, which is essentially what we have running the planet now. And what I'd like to present is not so much if we can stop this war, then this is what we're going to get, because I want to go through some of the projects that are related to how we're going to physically grow ourselves, our economy, and orient our people, get our young people who are, as Diane went through very eloquently, hopeless cases with no future, no hope. How we're going to get back on track, some of the projects that we do, which is actually the credit system. People always say, well, what do you mean by credit system? Is this just national banking? Is this just like we're going to change some rules of banking? No, it's the type of orientation that we have to develop the future. And so I want to go through this, but I don't want to present this as if we stop the war, the thermonuclear war, that the British, what they are hoping is that with this Ohio-class submarine fleet, which each of these having a destructive capability that boggles the imagination. We're not talking about something that we're going to come out of. We're talking about an extinction event here. And what the British would prefer to do, the imperial banking crowd, is to tell Russia and China, you back down. Number one, you bail out the Euro system. You keep this international banking system going. And number two, you shred all of the treaties and economic cooperative relations that they have begun to embark on. Because they're moving in the direction that mankind needs to go in terms of development perspective. High-tech gains in space exploration, nuclear power, there's all kinds of great projects that are being initiated. And so the British are saying, you back down from this development perspective and we won't launch the thermonuclear holocaust. But if you don't, we cannot exist on this planet if we're not ruling the show. And that is their thinking. These families, they go back. It's not a, Diane gave this sketch of this imperial tradition, but it really does go back to, I mean, you could go back further than Babylon. I mean, these families, and they have this mindset that if they don't rule, if it's not their royal bloodlines, then they don't want to live on this planet. So they are committed to this. And so this is the point. What we're up against is not a, if we stop the war, then we get to do the progress. The reason the war exists is because the Russians and the Chinese have committed to the progress. And they have invited us over and over to join them. Every one of these offers has been rejected by Obama. And so I just want to give a quick sketch of that. So remember, LaRouche laid out the thermonuclear war threat back when I was actually at a conference in San Francisco with Summer Shields. And this was the first time publicly that Lynn had said that this was going to be, that what this was going on after the death of Gaddafi was that they were going to rush into Syria and Iran and use that as a staging ground for the attack on Russia and China. And I remember at that conference, it was a little, like, you know, not exactly easy to stomach this concept. But if you, now looking back on it, and you look at what did occur, because October was the month that Gaddafi was assassinated. And coincidentally, and not necessarily coincidentally, but this was also the month where Russia and China had a series of conferences where they ended up signing somewhere around 17 major initiatives around, as I said before, space exploration, nuclear power, oil and gas. This was where they also discussed the rail link ultimately going into South Korea, which would be a benefit for the North Korea-South Korean relationships, get them more integrated, get the North Koreans out of poverty. But this was the direction that they were going. And this was also the time when Russia had asked Obama, will you give us an assurance that these missile defense systems in Eastern Europe are not directed at us, at Russia? And Obama flat out refused to give them any sort of legal written guarantees. And so what did the Russians do? Did they say, okay, well, that means we have to square off against each other, or this is a direct provocation? What they did is very interesting. They brought LaRouche's Strategic Defense Initiative out, which was the idea, as Lynn had put forward. Maybe, Bob, maybe show that one just so people can see this. But Lynn, this was a discussion that he had with Reagan at well, there was more than just that, but this is a picture that shows that relationship, that LaRouche had gotten Ronald Reagan, or had presented him with the idea of the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was to take the Soviets and the U.S., who were effectively pitted against each other in an arms race that was insane and well, that literally was referred to as mutually assured destruction, and to come up with a higher idea, a kind of a poetic idea, if you will, that would make that whole scenario obsolete by developing a technology that would render nuclear warfare obsolete. And so there's just a few pictures. This is Reagan announcing it, the Strategic Defense Initiative 1983, which yesterday was, that was the 29th anniversary of the announcement of the SDI. And then just, these are some of the images that either people will remember or not. But so what the Russians did is they proposed the strategic defense of the Earth. Now the timing is very interesting because right around that time is when that big asteroid, about the size of an aircraft carrier, had floated between us and the moon. And that's, were that to have, I did a little bit of calculations, were that to have hit downtown Seattle, it would have basically blasted everything. This maybe may not be so relevant to you geographically, but these baseball stadiums all the way to the Space Needle, which is basically like the entirety of downtown, that would have been the crater. So this is not a small incident. This could be something where millions would be dead from it. And so they brought it up that not only could we put the SDI back on the table to stop nuclear warfare, but we could deal with the threats that we should be dealing with space debris and so on. So this is all occurring in October. This was put on the table by Dmitry Rogozin, who at the time was the envoy to NATO, the Russian envoy to NATO. He is currently, I believe, the deputy prime minister of Russia. I might have that wrong, but anyway, now also at that time, Hillary Clinton had come out with an article in Foreign Policy magazine where she had said, why don't we work with the Russians and the Chinese on Arctic development? And so that's where I want to kind of get into a little bit of NAWAPA as the key program in terms of the next probably 50 years, really, in terms of how this will end up playing out. But it really should be seen as part of the future that is going to replace this dying British imperial system. And it should also be seen as this question of the loss of morality as the project that's going to reorient society. And I always have this image in my mind. Apparently, if you take an iron bar, right, and if you point it towards the North Pole and then hammer on it with a hammer, it will actually become magnetic. And so you can change the orientation of the structures inside this metal bar that at 1 minute before you hold it up to metal filings and it's not doing anything, and then all of a sudden you just start smacking the hell out of it, and it's all of a sudden changed its orientation to do something, right? And that's what we're going to do with NAWAPA. We're going to take this younger generation and we're going to throw them out there. One of my associates at Seattle, Todd Nordquist, he has this idea. He says, you know, we got all totally unskilled, I mean, these kids don't know how to do anything. So, video games, you know, Twitter, whatever the hell else they're doing. But he said, so how do you get them training? And his idea was to take everybody, send them all out into the middle of Alaska with just shovels, and just have them start digging the ditches for, you know, the trenches for the NAWAPA program. But meanwhile, you begin to bring the heavy machinery and just sort of start lining it up so that they can see it. And I bet they'll probably learn how to use it and figure it out pretty quick. We won't need advanced training programs, just, you know, just get them out there. So I think that's a good idea. But so let me just pull up the NAWAPA here. Now, before we begin, I want to make the point that, you know, the national slate, what Lynn had laid out, because we had a discussion, all right, what should our policy be? Well, we've got NAWAPA, we've got space exploration, we've got Glass-Steagall, we've got the credit system, we have all these different things. And Lynn, we had a discussion, and he just said the platform is Glass-Steagall and the credit system. But of course, if you think about it, the credit system is not just national banking per se. It's a reflection of a principle of sovereignty and a commitment to the future. And so this is an example of what the credit system is. So I'll just make a few, I don't guess we'll just have to deal with this, but this is right here, the Mackenzie River system. It's sort of a whole big basin going up through, and then up top is the Yukon system. So there's two main basins that the NAWAPA water is collected. Okay, now this is the whole runoff in terms of all the water up through that region that will be getting the main reservoir system, which is what you see up here, right before the Rocky Mountain Trench. This is the Rocky Mountain Trench here, which dumps out into Montana into Flathead Lake. But that whole area up there, all the runoff is 1,300 million acre feet. Now, for most of you, like me, I said that means nothing in terms of what an acre feet is. I mean, one thing, it's an acre, which is 660 feet on one side, 66 feet on the other side, but then 1 foot deep, right? So if you can imagine how much water is in that, a big fish tank that big. Now, what we do is we tap. Now, of that total runoff, those two river basins, the Mackenzie and the Yukon system, are about half of that, 630 million acre feet. And then what we're going to do is, by building dams high enough, and one of the dams, the Chitna Dam, is 1,700 feet tall. Now, the current, do you want to pull up that next, keep going. Yeah, okay. This is the world's tallest dam. I believe it's in Tajikistan. And it's the Nurek Dam. It's 1,000 feet tall. Now, 1,700 feet means that we have the world's tallest dam plus the Hoover Dam, which is the next one. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, there we go. So that's like the tallest dam plus the Hoover Dam, which is, imagine the engineering feat that that's going to take. And so what you'll do then, go back to the NAWAPA, is you take, by building those dams high enough, you can effectively take the water that's normally just going to rush down to sea level, and you can hold it back and start redirecting it backwards. And so, and then through pumping stations, you're gonna raise it. Now, what we end up doing is tapping about 20% of that water, which is around 138 million acre feet. Now, just to give you a sense of what this means, that's per year. And so if you took 138 million acre feet and you, per year as a flow rate, if you could just somehow imagine that it's just like rushing out of a big hose or something, you know, what that would do would fill up 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools every second. That's the flow rate. So the entire runoff is about 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools per second, the 1,300 million acre feet. Okay, so now and then also just to give you a sense of what that means in terms of irrigation, the total irrigated land, or the amount of water that we use for irrigating land in the United States, is about 144 million acre feet, according to at least the estimates that I've seen. Just let me make a point here. Don't quote all these numbers as gospel, because there are some of these numbers that we're still trying to calibrate and get them down right. But these are general ballparks, and they're good enough for the purposes of now. So in other words, 144 million acre feet to currently irrigate everything in the United States. And then this is going to provide 138 just with that portion. And then there's another, well, there's some of it that will be used for the pumping and just sort of doesn't go anywhere. But then in total, we end up with about 160 million acre feet between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We get about half of that, so about 80 million. Canada gets 60, and northern Mexico gets 20. And so, but yeah, that would, the 138 is basically about what's currently irrigated in the United States. So you're talking about getting into the domain of doubling food production. And then, of course, there's the other aspect, which is through evapotranspiration, you've got this water that's now being brought in and greening areas that are not green, and then the transpiration process, or the evaporation, and then rain cycles and so on, you'll actually increase the overall water availability, or water coming through the system. Apparently the number is 2.7 times, which I have yet to work out why that is. But so, and let me just make a few more points, just to give you a sense of the scope here. It will also end up producing about 78 gigawatts of electricity through the whole thing. We'll end up needing about 36 gigawatts for the pumping systems, which really raise the water through the various pumps through the whole system. It's about 8/10 of a mile, between 8 and 9/10 of a mile. So that's trying to think of getting all that water up a hill and what kind of pumps you would need to get it up there. It's some serious energy. But in the end, you get about 40 gigawatts of electricity, which just about 1 gigawatt is what it takes to for 1 million households. So you can just have that as an idea. So you're talking about 40 million households, which is not just 40 million people, but of course we'll probably use it for industry. So I'm just sort of giving that as a ballpark. But and then just lastly, I just want to go through a few other, just to give a sense of the magnitude. 1,200 miles of tunnels. So that's about from here to Tampa Bay, Florida. Just imagine driving that way, and all the while you've got driving through various sizes of tunnels. One of the tunnels is 100 feet diameter. The biggest tunnel boring machine we have is only about 62 feet right now. So this means whole new engineering capabilities to be able to develop the machinery. We'll have 14 of the pumps, which are going to require 36 gigawatts of electricity. 95 dams, I believe, is in total. I think there's 57 new dams that will be constructed. There's 46 locks through the whole system to raise and lower the water. It'll be the first time that through here, through the Great Lakes, and up through here, and then out by my neck of the woods, you'll have a navigable sea lane. So you could come from Europe over to Asia right through the top there. And there's 4,500 miles of canals. So this is, now just the last thing here is the question of how much earth is moved, how much concrete is used, and how much steel is used. So we're going to remove or displace about 27 billion cubic yards of dirt and other stuff. Again, these are big numbers, so I was trying to figure out some way to represent it, but that'd be about like taking 3 Empire State Buildings from the top of the antenna to the bottom, 3 of those up, 3 of those out, and 3 of those this way, and making a big cube of dirt. So just kind of envision that, and just imagine these little, like, backhoes just kind of scraping away at that, and imagine how long that would take, now 9 billion cubic yards of concrete. So that's 1.5 World Trade Centers, the rooftop to the bottom, or no, actually the top of the antenna. 1.5 of those, also cubed, of concrete. And 44 million tons of steel, which I did a little calculation. I took 2 railroad tracks and decided to extend them for as long as they could go until they would run out of 440 tons of steel, and it went around the Earth 72 times. So that's without the iron to fasten them down. But anyway, it just gives you a good sense of the magnitude there. So now this is going to be jobs, but that's not the point of this. It's not, because when we're talking about an economic recovery, it's not a matter of jobs per se. Right? This is the whole point of Obama's stimulus program. You can put money in and you can change light bulbs and you can patch holes in the road, but if that's all you're doing, you're actually just running into inflation. Because you just put more money in, and granted you made things maybe minutely more efficient, but you haven't added to the overall capability of the system as a whole. NAWAPA adds to the system as a whole in terms of water for agriculture, water for industry, electricity generation, all of the question of the scientific advancement that's going to have to come. I mean, when you're dealing with the question of Arctic development, because there's other projects, I'll just maybe reference a few of the UNCA there. This is the space city, essentially, that Russia's already planning to build up above the Arctic Circle. And it will hold 5,000 people and be an entirely self-enclosed city. So now when you start getting up into Arctic development, which we're also going to do with the land bridge policy, with the whole integrated rail system, all the rail. Can you show the 21st century one? I just want to show you this here. This is from 2007. Mega projects, the alternative to war. So this is not, like I said at the beginning, what we're presenting here is not it's not an if-then situation. If we stop the war, it's the war is caused by us and the patriots of other nations, Russia, China, so on, of moving forward with this development perspective. And so I just want to go through here that I think that what we're dealing with the credit system is that, as Lynn had said in a discussion with Cody that he was a part of, that what it is it's the implementation of human creativity. That you're seeing that the kind of projects, the kind of scientific development that is going to enable us to do this is going to require a whole creative upshift, both scientifically, but the cultural element to back it up, to create the cultural conditions where you actually have a higher level of dialogue going in all areas, not just simply scientific, but artistic composition as well. And that what it really gets into is the question of a credit system in terms of making advancements that this is not optional for us. Anything that exists, and that, in one sense, that's what we're actually dealing with, is are we going to exist? And for things that exist, because as we've gone through clearly, 98% of every species that's ever existed on this planet does not exist anymore. So what is it that about existence, what does existence require? And it requires, as Cody and these guys have gone through in the basement, a constant level of progress, but a very specific type of progress, to increase the overall energy flux density of the system. Right? Because you can take the biosphere as a whole and you can say, yes, all the individual species that once were comprised within the biosphere are now gone, but the biosphere as a whole has remained a living entity, if you will. So what is it about, how did the biosphere continue to exist? Well, everything that was a part of it had these upshifts, in part caused by the fact that everything that's dying before the new species come on board is creating a new, maybe more complex degree of activity below it, say in the soils and whatnot. But then you have this other element, which is that the solar radiation, other forms of cosmic radiation, is demanding these kind of changes as well. And so you get the kind of upshifts from, amphibians to reptiles to mammals, each of them increasing their capability, increasing their range of mobility, and so on, right? Now, that type of progress, to increase the energy flux density, is what we have to do. And for us, in terms of the, can you show the one? What it looks like in terms of energy, just to kind of get an image of it, is these are all equivalent amounts of energy going from wood to coal to oil to fission processes and then to nuclear fusion processes. So you see that you're getting either the same amount with less or with the same amount of material more. And so we have to do this. And just to close on this idea that with these kind of projects, you realize that there's almost this creative impulse that's, or not impulse, for us, the question of creativity is very willful. But you see it within the biosphere as almost a playing out of a maybe say a process of mind. We've done some studies like on the development of the biosphere, where all of a sudden winged creatures, birds and whatnot, and then this helps play a role in fertilization and adding to more advanced plants and so on. That also plays into the development of the different species that utilize these plants, the fruit-bearing. You see that there's almost like this process of thought, like that the biosphere is trying to imagine where it's going to have to go to get more advanced. Now, for us, we know that to make these kind of creative breakthroughs, number one, it does occur through an individual process. Right? Each individual makes the kind of breakthroughs that have resulted in our ability to increase in this way. But when we apply that to know if our ideas are actually coherent with the universe, the way in which we check it is through developing technologies. Right? So now we've developed technologies that then are used by other people, right? And so you end up it becomes a social process. And what we end up getting to is a point where we become part of a process of transformation that, because we live and have a history and have a sense of wanting to pass this history on to our children and grandchildren's grandchildren, we're now participating in a process of creativity that is capable of elaborating itself. So you have a type of transformation that is now capable of elaborating itself. I'll just end on this, and I don't say this from a religious standpoint or anything, but apparently if you could do a literal translation of Jehovah, God, or I think it's Yahweh actually, would be something along the lines of that which is capable of elaborating its own continuing transformation. Right? So that which is capable of elaborating its own continuing transformation. So if we're made in the image of God, wouldn't it make sense that we are participating in a process of creativity, but through a social process and through generations and through history, we're able of elaborating that whole process of development, of creativity. And so I just want to make that point that this is what we're dealing with these kind of big projects, is a commitment to the future, to say that we've been given this opportunity to be here by whatever we call the name of our Creator, to participate in an unfolding process of development, and that it's not really optional for us. Right? So it's not like it's just because it would be more pleasurable that we do these projects, although it will be. You know, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a hell of a lot better than what we're doing right now, which is on the verge of thermonuclear annihilation. Yeah, exactly. So, but that's the way the universe is designed, that it actually, the best option will be the best for us, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it with, in a sense, a duty, that we are here with a certain mission, and that mission is to ensure that this continues. So look, that's real statecraft, and that is what we are trying to bring through this national slate, is that conception of the merging of science, art, and statecraft, that it's, creativity is the core of it. I'll just leave it there for now. We can talk more if anyone has any other questions later on.